Men's therapy sucks. It's been broken for a very, very long time. Most men walk into therapy expecting help and walk out feeling worse. I'm going to show you the 5 systemic reasons why traditional therapy fails men and what actually works instead. This isn't about therapy being bad. This is about a fundamental mismatch between how men process struggle and how therapy is designed. By the end, you'll understand exactly why you felt stuck in sessions and what alternative approaches might save your mental health. And if you stay until the end, I'll reveal the one trait therapists overlook that determines whether men heal or quit. Welcome back to Deeper Dudes. But first, let's talk about why so many men try therapy once and never go back. You're struggling. Maybe your marriage is hanging by a thread. Maybe you can't sleep. Maybe you're angry all the time and don't know why, so you finally do what everyone says you should do. You book a therapist. And within 3 sessions, you feel like you're doing it wrong. Research shows that men drop out of therapy at twice the rate of women, and 65% of men who start therapy quit within the first month. But here's what nobody tells you. You're not failing at therapy. Therapy is failing you. We're taught that asking for help is weakness, that real men solve their own problems. That talking about feelings is something women do. What a load of crap. But when you finally overcome all that conditioning and walk into a therapy office, the system itself reinforces every fear you had about being vulnerable. I know because I tried therapy 3 times before I understood why it wasn't working. The first therapist asked me how I felt about my childhood for 6 weeks straight. I didn't need to excavate my past. I needed tools to stop my life from falling apart right now. The second one nodded sympathetically while I talked, but never gave me a single concrete thing to do differently. And the third one seemed confused when I said I didn't want to just process emotions, I wanted to fix the actual problems creating them. That's when I realized something crucial. Therapy isn't broken. It's just built for a different operating system than the one most men run on. And here's exactly what's going wrong. The first major problem is the feminization of therapeutic models. This isn't about saying one gender's approach is better. It's about recognizing that modern therapy was largely developed by and for women's psychological needs. Most therapeutic frameworks prioritize emotional expression, relationship processing, and verbal exploration of feelings. These are valuable. But for many men, this feels like being handed a map written in a language you don't speak. Men are typically socialized to be action-oriented, solution-focused, and emotionally self-reliant. We're taught to do, not just to feel. When you're drowning, you don't want someone to ask how the water makes you feel. You want a life raft. Traditional talk therapy often skips the life raft and goes straight to exploring your relationship with water. Here's what this looks like in practice. A man comes in saying his marriage is failing. The therapist asks him to explore his attachment style from childhood. He wants a framework for communication. She wants him to sit with his feelings. Neither is wrong, but they're speaking different languages. And when the man leaves feeling like he wasted an hour and $200 talking in circles, he doesn't come back. He tells himself therapy doesn't work. But what actually doesn't work is a one-size-fits-all model being applied to people who need a different approach. The second reason therapy fails men is the vulnerability paradox. Therapy requires you to be vulnerable, to admit weakness, confusion, fear. But for most men, the act of sitting in that chair already required more vulnerability than they've shown in years. You've overcome the stigma. You've admitted you can't handle this alone. You've scheduled the appointment, you've shown up. That took enormous courage. But then you sit down, and the therapist immediately asks you to go deeper, to cry, to explore your shame, to name your fears out loud. And if you can't do that immediately, if you need to ease into it, if you need to build trust first, you can feel the disappointment. Some therapists even label this as resistance, as defensiveness, as you not being ready to do the work. This is where men quit, not because they don't want to heal, but because the demand for immediate deep vulnerability feels like being thrown into the deep end when you're still learning to swim. What men often need is a gradual on-ramp. Start with the practical. Build trust through competence. Show me you can help me with the surface problem, and I'll trust you with what's underneath. But most therapy models do the opposite. They want to dive straight to the root, and they interpret your hesitation as unwillingness rather than what it often is, which is self-protection in an unfamiliar environment where you don't yet feel safe. And once you understand these first two problems, the next ones become even clearer. But the third issue is perhaps the most damaging, and it's one almost nobody talks about. Before we go any further, I want to pause for something important. None of what we've been talking about matters if we don't have the energy and clarity to actually implement it. We all know what it feels like to wake up exhausted. No energy, poor focus, and zero motivation. We also know what it feels like when we get good, restful sleep, targeted therapy, and the right supplements. I've personally tested more things than you can imagine. I'm like your personal guinea pig. Everything I have listed in the description below is science-backed and extensively tested. And if you grab anything through my links, you'll be supporting this channel at zero cost to you. Thanks for taking a look. Now let's get back to it. If this is resonating, hit that like button so more men can find this when they need it. And drop a comment. Have you tried therapy? What was your experience? No judgment, just want to hear your story. Here's the truth about therapy that changes everything. The third reason it fails men is the pathologizing of masculine coping mechanisms. Men tend to cope through action, through physicality, through problem solving, through solitude, through purpose-driven work. These aren't disorders, they're strategies. But in many therapeutic frameworks, they're treated as avoidance. You go to the gym to clear your head? That's bypassing your emotions. You throw yourself into work when you're struggling? That's workaholism and avoidance. You need time alone to process? That's isolation and withdrawal. You want to fix the problem instead of talking about how it makes you feel? That's emotional suppression. Now, can these things become unhealthy? Absolutely. But they can also be profoundly healthy ways of regulating stress and building resilience. The problem is that therapy often starts from the assumption that if you're not processing things the way the model says you should, you're doing it wrong. I learned this the hard way. When I was going through a brutal period, I started running every morning. 5 miles, no music, just me and the road. It saved my mental health. But when I mentioned this to my therapist, she asked if I was using running to avoid sitting with my feelings. The question itself made me feel like I was failing at healing. But here's what was actually happening. Running gave me a physical outlet for anxiety. It proved I could still accomplish something when everything else felt out of control. It gave me space to think without the pressure of someone watching me think. That's not avoidance, that's regulation. And when therapists fail to recognize that men often heal through doing, not just through talking, they alienate the very people they're trying to help. The fourth problem is the lack of male-specific frameworks. Therapy has robust models for postpartum depression, for eating disorders, for trauma processing in female populations. But where are the models specifically designed for male depression, which often shows up as anger and irritability rather than sadness? Where are the frameworks for men's identity crises when their role as provider is threatened? Where's the specialized understanding of how shame operates differently in men? These things exist in research, but they rarely make it into the therapy room. Most therapists, whether male or female, are trained in gender-neutral models. And gender-neutral often means defaulting to frameworks that unconsciously center female psychological patterns, because that's what the research and training emphasized. When a man says he feels nothing, that's often pathologized as alexithymia or emotional numbness. But sometimes, for men, feeling nothing is the brain's way of saying I'm overwhelmed and I need to shut down to survive. That's not a disorder. That's a defense mechanism that might actually need to be worked with, not immediately dismantled. A better approach might be helping him build capacity to feel gradually, through achievement, through physical awareness, through purpose, before asking him to verbally articulate complex emotions he may not have the language for yet. The fifth and final reason therapy fails men is the absence of hierarchical respect. Men are often motivated by respect, by competence, by earned authority. When you sit across from a therapist, especially a young therapist, or one who hasn't demonstrated clear expertise, there's an unconscious evaluation happening. Does this person have the wisdom to guide me? Have they been through something hard? Do they understand the weight of what I'm carrying? If the answer feels like no, men disengage. This isn't about being disrespectful or dismissive. It's about the way many men are wired to receive guidance. We respect earned authority, a coach who's been in the arena, a mentor who's survived what we're facing, a guide who's proven they know the territory. But therapy often asks you to submit to a process led by someone you don't yet respect, and that creates internal resistance. When I finally found a therapist who worked, he was a former Marine who'd been through a divorce and a business failure. In the first session, he said, "I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to help you build a system so you don't fall apart next time." That earned my respect. And once I respected him, I could be vulnerable with him. When you combine all 5 of these problems, you see why so many men walk away from therapy thinking it's not for them. It's not that therapy itself is broken. It's that the dominant models weren't built with men's psychological architecture in mind. The feminization of therapeutic models means the language and priorities don't match how many men process struggle. The vulnerability paradox demands too much, too fast, without building trust through competence first. The pathologizing of masculine coping treats healthy strategies as avoidance. The lack of male-specific frameworks means your depression, your shame, your identity crisis gets filtered through a lens that wasn't designed for your experience. And the absence of hierarchical respect means you're asked to follow someone you haven't been given reason to trust. But here's the good news. Once you understand why traditional therapy fails men, you can find what actually works. Seek therapists trained in solution-focused or cognitive behavioral approaches that emphasize action and tools, not just emotional exploration. Look for someone with lived experience that matches your struggle. Don't be afraid to interview your therapist. Ask them how they work with men specifically. Find modalities that include physicality, somatic therapy, adventure therapy, or even just a therapist who understands that your morning workout is part of your healing, not an obstacle to it. And remember, healing doesn't have to look like sitting on a couch talking about your feelings. For some men, it looks like building something, like joining a men's group, like working with a coach instead of a therapist, like reading, reflecting, and applying frameworks on your own terms. This is how men achieve real mental health. Not by forcing themselves into a system that doesn't fit, but by finding approaches that honor how they're built while still challenging them to grow. Drop a comment. Which of these 5 reasons hit hardest for you? Number 1, feminization of models. Number 2, vulnerability paradox. Number 3, pathologizing masculine coping. Number 4, lack of male frameworks. Or number 5, absence of hierarchical respect. And if you found a therapist or approach that actually worked, tell us what made the difference. Well, that's it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, please be sure to give it a like and maybe even subscribe to Deeper Dudes. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. It all helps the channel more than you know, and it also tells us that we should make more content like this. We post videos every other day that tackle real challenges men face. Remember, struggling doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The fact that you took time to watch this means you're ready for something better. Thanks again for watching and for checking out all the amazing products in the description below. They could jumpstart your healing journey. Catch you in the next one, Deeper Dudes. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, keep thriving.